federal government and Senate to probe Buhari concerning the 30 trillion naira Ways and Means loan. Good morning and welcome to the Dailies on Echo Television, where we keep you updated with all that is happening in Nigeria from our Nigerian newspaper. I am Selela Shadasho, and I'll be doing the program alongside Rachel Tamsi. Good morning.
Good morning, Sele.
All right, we have quite a number of stories on the paper this morning that are quite interesting, so we would love you to be part of the conversation. Drop your comment, your views on Facebook and on YouTube. And we shall go straight into the paper, starting with the Daily Sun newspaper.
On the Daily Sun newspaper, IPOB bans protest in Southeast, mocks organizers. Transporters hike fares in Avia as petrol hit 1,000 naira to a litre. The big story on the paper, 30 trillion naira Ways and Means loan, federal government Senate probe Buhari. The writer saying Edun says investigation will determine whether to repay loans or not. More details can be found on page 6. Hardship protests split Senate leadership. They are sponsored, says Apavio. No demonstrations, real a statement coming from Indume. You can find details on page 27. High cost of cement, federal government threatens to lift ban on importation. You can find details on page 25. 9 died, 7 injured in Lagos Abeokuta Expressway crash. ONSAN, CBN joined forces to crack down on forex speculators. You can find details on page 4. Still on state police, reps OK bill for second reading. Governors to appoint police chiefs. More details on page 26. At the downside of the paper, PDP secretary Southeast NWC on coalition cause. More details on page 29. Then we have a picture story where we can see family members of the at the commendation service for the late former governor of Ondo State, Oluwarotimi Akeredolu, at All Saints Church, Jericho, Ibadan. This happened yesterday, and also we are also seeing the Sun Awards being given to recipients, and that's all the news on Daily Sun newspaper.
On the Punch newspaper, we're starting with the state police. Governors to appoint police commissioners. Bill leads condition for the CP sacking. And the writer here says CPs can't be removed without the PSC and Assembly's approval. You can find more detail of that on page 2. Oyebanje hails Punch solid journalistic excellence at 50. You can find more detail on page 7. The big story here, we're seeing the Senate to probe Buhari's government Emefede over the 30 trillion naira CBN loans. Senate links food security crisis to reckless Ways and Means loan under Buhari's cabinet. Panel to investigate CBN's 10 trillion naira anchor borrower scheme, $2.4 billion forex fraud, and others. Motorists lament poor drainages as flood submerges Lagos road. We can see people struggling to make it to their places of assignment and work and also school, and we just hope that this will be an eye-opener before the rains will come in. Barely next 2 months or 3 months we'll be having the rains again in other parts of the country. So we hope that people will do all their best to make sure that their drainages are clear so that water can get to pass, and then we can also reduce the impact of flood in our various communities. Still on the Punch newspaper, federal government blames opposition for food crisis, uncovers 32 smuggling routes. Zookeeper killed while trying to rescue woman from the lion. This is coming from Nasu Chair. Federal government seeks $10 billion to stabilize exchange rate as Naira tumbles. You can find more detail of that story on page 17 of the Punch newspaper, and that's all on the Punch.
On Blueprint newspaper, CBN teams up with NSA to hunt down foreign exchange speculators. Niger invites labor leaders for dialogue to avert strike. First Bank, Citibank, IBTC emerged top destination for foreign investment. More details can be found on page 19. Algeria FA decides on Super Eagles Gaffer Pissarro this week. The big story on the paper, Senate to probe Buhari orders over 30 trillion naira Ways and Means. Alleged facility recklessly spent, cost of food and security crisis. losers in 2023 elections behind nation's economic woes, a statement coming from Shettima, and I believe that is a very senseless statement coming from the vice president of the country. You can find details inside the paper. We'll unlock trillions in public wealth to boost economy, a statement from President Tinubu. Federal government to release 60,000 metric tons of grains, custom plants distribution to confiscate food items. Cement manufacturers using unstable forex to inflict hardship on Nigerians, coming from the federal government. Women in Tinubu campaign beg for inclusion in government. Bandits kill 8 civilians in Zamfara state, and we still have NATO direct members to resume lifting of petroleum products. More details can be found on page 7, and that's all the news on Blueprint newspaper.
That is to see that actually their demands have been met if they are going back to work again, and I'm happy. I mean, they're actually going back to work, because I just cannot imagine the hardship that this will add to Nigerians. But you know, looking at what the split we're having in the Senate concerning the present demonstration or protest coming from Nigerians to actually express their grievances and their displeasure with what is going on. We're having the Senate president on one hand saying that these people are sponsored, and we're having the minority leader in Dume saying the fact that, you know what, no, this demonstration is real. Hunger is real.
Yeah.
Because if you look at what is happening presently, you would agree the fact that a lot of things are not going as they should be. And so we wonder why our Senate president would feel. I mean, just yesterday, we were actually talking on the fact where we saw the Senate telling Nigerians to please take it easy. They understand our pains. And a lot of Nigerians will disagree that the Senate is actually aware of their pain. Where we're having the Senate having over 70 billion naira to have XUV cars, their allowances and all of this are being met. And then here Nigerians taking it to the street to actually express what is happening. And then we are seeing that, and I say I'm looking forward to a government, Richard, that will stop pointing the finger and keep saying that it's, Rachel, you don't need to be sponsored if you're, I mean, when you're hungry, what are you looking for on the streets?
Of course not.
If you're hungry, why should you go out? Don't you have something better to do with your time rather than causing confusion? So this is a way for our leaders to actually know that, you know what, there's fire on the mountain. And the earlier you look for what to quench this fire, the better for you. Yesterday we made mention the fact that as it is presently, there is a time bomb, and it's just a matter of time that this thing will blow up. And when it blows up, it's going to consume a number of people. So I'm hoping that our leaders will look at it from that point of view, that, you know what, Nigerians are hungry. A lot of things are not going well, rather than saying that these people are sponsored. We saw that in Nigeria, where some people were being arrested after the protest, but then they were later released on bail and all of that. But then let us look beyond the reason, because there's always a reason for something to happen. So why don't you look at the root cause, deal with it, and then we'll be able to see that eventually, to see people on the street even after meeting their demand, then you know that these people are actually out for trouble. Then you take the right measure, not when you've not done anything about it and then you're saying these people are sponsored. So I'm looking forward to seeing that the government will actually do something. We're seeing that they have released about another 60,000.
That they will.
They will. So that is to say, we just have to keep our fingers crossed and see when they will eventually. I mean, already we are seeing various states are trying their best to see what they can do at the state level. But believe you me, there's not much our state governors can do regarding this, because they also rely from the federal government. So let us see what they will do regarding all of this.
Tell you, our leaders love blame games. That this is just what I can say from all of this, making it look as if this problem that people are out there protesting about it doesn't exist. And for you to say it's being sponsored, it just shows your lack of empathy towards what Nigerians are going through concerning this hardship. And that's why I have to say this is very senseless, coming from the vice president, saying that it is the losers of 2023 elections that are behind economic woes. What does he mean by that? How are they behind the nation's economic woes? They didn't float the currency. They are not the ones creating the policies as it is now. They are not the one that removes subsidies. So how are they behind the nation's economic woes? How? They are not in position. It's your administration that is in position right now. Every policy we've seen, every change, every chaos is made. So how in the world are they behind the nation's economic growth? And then when you see our leaders talk like that, and for some reason they want us to believe that they can feel our pain, and we clearly, by their word, we know that they are definitely speaking from the abundance of their heart. We know that from their words, they do not feel it and they do not understand. And that is why we will have our Senate president saying it's being sponsored. We have civil organizations suing you since last year, saying you need to do this. We have labor saying we haven't seen our wage rewards. We are having the LLC, the TUC, and everybody out there, CSO, SERAP, and all of that talking left, right, center. And you would sit down and say it's being sponsored. When common man out there, the masses are not finding it easy. Nobody needs sponsorship to be able to voice out what worries them. We are here, Sele, for example, every day, and we are calling the leaders to do right by us. Are we sponsored? Of course not. But we're Nigerians. We are out here and we are in the market. And we know what it feels like. We're out there and we're trying to take a keke, and we know what is out there. And we have to sit down here, and when we call the attention of the government, it doesn't have to come from a sponsored position, but from a position that I am a Nigerian and I am feeling the situation that is going. And I believe it is the same for every other person out there. And it's just really sad to see our government talk without empathy, and then no wonder they are doing little or nothing to ease the hardship, because if not, we could have seen something very significant going on. And even the one that could be significant, they're not doing it a palliative. We didn't see it with the wage. We are not seeing anything. So the little that they should be able to do, they are not even doing it. And then I'm just wondering and looking forward to seeing if they'll be able to pull off the big things that will really help us in this country.
Well, let us keep giving them the long road and see what they will do eventually concerning the hardship happening presently in the country. Let's take a look at the Vanguard newspaper. Federal government targets $10 billion to increase forex liquidity, stabilize the naira, coming from Tinubu, on page 4 of the Vanguard newspaper. Edo 2024 APC XWC divided over Adil Hussain and Akpablu, where we have some riders here. Usifo, former aspirant, backs Ada Hussain, and then groups fear APC may not have a candidate, and then Labour Party holds World Congress replies Apata on INEC's letter. More detail on that story can be found on page 2. And on insecurity bill to stabilize state police skills second reading in the House of Reps. And then we are also having Labour Party crisis. State chairman deny plot to suspend Obi Bak Abure. More detail of that on page 4. We are having NECA oil marketers to federal government. Sean Pride reviews subsidy removal, flotation of Naira. Now we're seeing that a number of people are coming out to actually back what other people have been saying. It is not too late to actually reverse this policy of removal of fuel subsidy and also floating of the Naira. We're having a writer following that story that says least anti-business policies of government, worsening employment index, other causes of nations' economic woes. Now we're seeing the real problems of the economic woes rather than blaming the opposition party or whoever the losers are for 2023 election. PEC Forex raised at 750 naira to $1. Oil marketers beg Tinubu. Well, we hope that all of this will actually be revealed by the presidency and also the Senate. Let us see how that turns out to be. More detail can be found on page 5. And then we're seeing here concerning the burial of Akira Dudu, governors, ex-governors, ministers paid their last respect to the former governor. 10 billion naira fraud, EFCC detained ex-Kwara governor Ahmed. You can find detail of that on page 6. And on economic hardship, saboteurs working against us, still coming from the Vice President Sheitima. Federal government to probe 23 trillion naira ways and means, coming from the Minister of Finance Edu, as Mofi launches 100 billion naira fund to attract investors. More detail on page 19. And also we are seeing some column for sports and also another from Afe Babalola. Now we have asked to reject the new IPPIS in 6 of fake directive on removal of varsities. We remember last year we saw that the universities have been exempted, that they can actually use their own payroll that they have been used to paying rather than using the IPPIS. And here we're seeing they are insisting on that directive, so you can find more detail of that on page 9. Tinubu directs payment of state house electricity debt. Remember, yesterday we saw that they said if they do not pay, they actually risk to be disconnected. So here we're seeing that the president have directed the payment of that over 43 billion naira electricity debt. More detail on page 26. And we have the picture story here where we can see the conference concerning the public wealth meeting that held in Abuja yesterday. So more detail can be found in the paper, and that's all on Vanguard newspaper.
On Nigerian Tribune, customs to distribute seized food items to Nigerians. NSA, CBN launch joint war against forex speculators. Details on page 13. Federal government threatens to open borders for cement importation to counter high cost. The big story, economic hardship forces hell-bent on undermining Nigeria. A statement coming from Shetima says 32 routes for smuggling food items out of Nigeria uncovered. Federal government to raise $10 billion for increased liquidity and naira stability. To release another 60,000 metric tons of grains. Executive order to float dollar-denominated securities in the offering, and you can find details on page 5. Bill to establish state police passes second reading at Reps. 151 houses flooded in Lagos rain. Guinea's military junta dissolves government and seals borders. More details can be found on page 13. Since May 29, Nigeria moving from one trouble to another, coming from Anglican bishop, says Nigerians frustrated, hungry, angry, hard to pacify. More details can be found on page 10. Block molders kick over federal government producers agreed price. Senate to probe 30 trillion naira ways and means under Buhari to examine 10 trillion naira intervention anchor borrowers program. More details can be found on page 8. Picture story showing the funeral service of Akeredolu, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the leadership newspaper, bandits kill 14, abduct 72 in Katsina and Zamfara state. More detail found on page 18. And here we have fixing gas supply issues will boost industrialization. You can find more of that on page 23. This is coming from Tony Olumelo. You can find more in the paper. Also, we're seeing Mogalo to give keynote at leadership conference and award. More detail in the paper. And on Kano rerun, police warn APC and NPP supporters against violence. More detail of that story can be found inside the paper. Other stories still on the front page of the paper. On hardship, presidency blame economic saboteurs for food crisis. As custom moved to crash prices with seized item to sell bag of rice for 20,000 naira, intercept 4 trucks intended for illegal export. Yesterday we saw others that they actually intercepting Kano around Jigawa axis. More detail found on page 4. State police bill passes second reading. More detail on page 9. Federal government begins audit of 22.7 trillion naira CBN ways and means loan. More detail on page 4. Naira firms to 1,551.24 naira, gains 2.9% at the official window. Kirby record 25 suspended polio virus cases. We're seeing that polio is there again. We hope that the health ministry over there in Kirby State will do something regarding these cases that have been suspected there, and then they'll be able to issue out the whatever vaccine that is needed to actually curtail the spread of this polio virus. And that's all on leadership newspaper.
On this day newspaper, Senate sets up panel to probe Buhari over 30 trillion naira ways and means. Lawmakers to investigate anchor borrowers program, $2.4 billion forex scam. House moves to investigate privatization concession of 22 government silos. More details on page 44. Southeast PDP gives party condition on choice of national secretary. Nigeria won't fall, remains Africa's giant, a statement from Idris. The writer saying we'll overcome our challenges, says Kalu. Customs to disburse forfeited items to mitigate food crisis. State police bill passes second reading. The big story on the paper, federal government declares war on FX speculators as Naira slides to 1,830 Naira to $1. Deploys ONSA, CBN, police, EFCC, customs, NFIU to combat speculative activities. Tinubu says $10 billion FX inflow coming. President declares government will create millions of jobs, unlock trillions in public wealth to boost economy. Statement from Shetima, some forces hell-bent on plunging country into anarchy. NACCIMA writes CBN Governor, Minister of Trade profile strategies to address Naira slight inflationary pressure. You can find details on the front page and continue on page 16. A picture story showing meeting of Southeast Zonal Working Committee and PDP leaders in Enugu State. And that's all the news on this day newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, confusion as Naira crisis differs intervention and fuel inflation. More detail on page 6. 4 in every 10 Nigerians are in debt, and which is very true. You can find more detail of that analysis and how the Guardian came up with that on page 5. Bill for state police passes second reading in the House of Reps. More detail inside the paper. Falana insists on price control as Shetima blames saboteurs for food crisis. Investors lost 2.6 trillion naira in 2 ways amid low confidence. This is on the business angle. You can find that on page 18. Marketers seek state of emergency on refineries. More on page 5. Senate queries 30 trillion naira facility from Buhari and others. And then Nema is talking about 151 houses have been affected by the downpour in Lagos. We're still having the Punch giving us a cross-section of various pictures of what the rain did to the road and houses of some residents over there in Lagos State. And that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On the Nation newspaper, Aidatiwa Duke Fayemi Otudeko orders honor Akeredolu. Details can be found on page 6. House of Reps pushes on weak state police bill. Lawmakers in hot debate. Lagos begin process to move computer village. Tinubu directs payment of State House electricity bill. CBN's 22.7 trillion naira overdraft to government for probe. Senate OK's investigation. We will audit it, says Edun. You can start with the details on the front page. Truck owners resume petrol loading. 3 Edo APC aspirants petition NWC. Details can be found on page 4. The big story on the paper, we will battle forces bent on subverting country. Statement from Vice President Shetima. ONSA, CBN, NFIU go after saboteurs undermining Naira. You can start with the details on the front page. Southeast PDP leaders reject Ayawu as National Secretary. Mba Wabara Wodo Adefe Oke Ude Okoye. You can start with the details on the front page. At the downside of the paper, 60,000 metric tons of grain coming to bring down food prices, says Minister. And that's all the news on the Nation newspaper.
On Nigerian News Direct, armed men kill 6, destroy houses and vehicles in Katsina State. ONSA, CBN join forces to curb speculative activities stabilizing the forex market. Bill to create state police scale the second reading. And the big story, Kyari Elumelu tap electricity generation as key driver of Nigeria's industrialization future. As the federal government moves to present bill to end ways and means, more detail found on page 10. And on the wage award, civil servant commence indefinite strike in Niger State. That's talking about, we're seeing that one of the people have captured that they are actually in talks. The government of the state is calling them to actually negotiate because they said they are open to negotiation. Tinubu orders payment of the debt owned by the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company by the State House. More detail on page 2. And we have a picture story still showing us the meeting that held yesterday at the Public Wealth and Management Conference in Abuja yesterday. We can see the Vice President together with the Minister of Finance and other very key holders in that position trying to profile solution to what is happening in the country. And that's all on Nigerian News Direct.
On the matrix, federal government targets $10 billion to stabilize Naira and grow the economy. Preliminary round draw for AFCON 2025 holds today. Nigerians have no business being poor. Statement from Shetima calls for restructuring, repositioning of Bank of Agriculture to achieve food security. The big story, fresh trouble for Emefiele. Senate moves to probe 32.7 trillion naira CBN anchor borrowers' ways and means policies. State governors benefited from 18 billion naira as shock observers on the ways and means since 2015. These are allegations from senators. Senators set up special committee to scrutinize 30 trillion naira intervention disbursements. More details can be found on page 2. Investors lose over 2.5 trillion naira in 2 days as equities market tumbled. This is on the NGX. And on Odo Guber primary, fresh drama as APC overrules Uzodinma issues new directive. Lagos plan to transform Ikeja Computer Village into residential area. And on entertainment, Davido to distribute 300 million naira to orphanage. Failed distribution to continue as NATO suspends planned nationwide strike. Federal government poised to increase power supply, hands over $1.3 billion Zungeru hydroelectric plant to concessionaire. You can start with the details on the front page and continue inside the paper. Picture story showing managing the nation asset and resource. And that's all the news on the Matrix newspaper.
Well, I hope as much as our Vice President said we have no business being poor, he's also having policies that will make sure that Nigerians are not poor.
Exactly.
Here we're saying that, 4 out of 10 Nigerians are actually in debt. And you remember all the time we also saw the fact that it's even more painful because Nigerians are going to collect debt, not for business, but for consumption. So it's really sad. So I love it when I hear very positive comments coming from our leaders, but I'm hoping that beyond the comments that are coming, there are also policies, talking about factors that the government is putting in place to make sure that, we have all that is needed. So whatever the government needs to do to be able to tap the wealth from the public wealth that we have, please, they should tap it out so that Nigerians can actually benefit from it. And then we'll see that we are out of that place where we are part of the poor nations in the country, because that it is, whether we want to deceive ourselves or we want to accept it or not, the way things are going right now, we are moving to that place of being very, very poor. So I hope that we'll look into that, and then we'll not just be confessing and saying this, and we are not working towards aligning with what we are confessing about situations.
I mean, Sele, our politicians will always be politicians, and they just know the right sweet words to say to Nigeria. And it makes them look very intelligent. Of course they are, but you see, we are at the point where we need action. This is the same conference where we can see Vice President Chidima, we can see Finance Minister Edwin, and then we can see Chairman of the UBA, Elumelu, now all talking. And he talked about power, the way forward if we really want to go into industrialization in Nigeria and all of that. But you see, the thing is that, Sele, a common man knows that. Like, even someone that didn't go to school knows that electricity is the way forward. We don't want speeches. We don't want intelligent, big grammar, English, and all of that. What steps are you taking? This is where we will know if our leaders are solution-driven. It's one thing for you to say Nigerians have no business with poverty, and it's another thing for you to tell them we are starting at this point. That is you now, not only telling them that, we are going to solve poverty, but then you're telling them this is what we are going to do and this is how we are going to start it, and then give or take this time frame, we will be here and then you know what, given that time frame, 8 years later, 10 years later, we'll see that, you know what, Vice President Shatima said, this is where we are starting, this is where we will be, and then you know what, it's 2034 and we are there. This is what we're looking forward to. Yes, we need electricity. What is the way forward? Because we are suffering with gridlock. And grid collapse rather, and then we are seeing our megawatts dropping every day. There was a point in time it was 0, it was 67, and you wonder what will we do? What these megawatts? What kind of machine can it power and all of that? And then this is where I want enough with the speeches. We keep saying it. We know you are intelligent, but you see, your intelligence don't just stop at your speeches, your plan and the process. That's why we put you in office. Yes, we don't have any business with poverty. How do you plan on doing it? Tell us. Let's see you put in the steps, and then give or take within a short period of time, we will be there. That is honestly what I'm looking forward from our leaders. And until we start seeing that from them, we'll just keep saying thank you for the speeches. I mean, we know you're intelligent, but you know, we want to see the work, and then eventually we'll grow.
You remember, Rachel, during the campaign, a number of people came out to say this administration really want to progress. Advices that were coming with the fact that they should surround themselves with good and intellectual advisors who advise them on the way forward, because the way things are, we need people who are good in tech, we need people who are very good with the digital space, we need people who are good in various aspects regarding to what is happening globally. So we shouldn't just be in our local place and then thinking locally. We need to be thinking internationally, need to be thinking digitally, and then also be acting locally in how it's actually peculiar to us here in the country. And I'm beginning to wonder what kind of advisors our leaders are having, because I'm expecting that they should be able to advise them before taking every step, except if they try to tell us that our leaders take steps before seeking for advice. They are supposed to seek for advice before taking a step. And I think that is the only way we will not see that our leaders are making policies and then later on they are having regrets. Because believe me, the way the whole thing is working, our leaders might not come out to tell us we regret removing of the fuel subsidy, but the body language is saying that. So imagine if the fuel subsidy was there, now the government is going to spend more trying to get food for Nigerians. Why didn't you just leave the fuel subsidy, even though we know that some people were actually benefiting from it? But if only we're doing it the right way, if only we had auditing being done regarding all of that, if only we're now buying time to fix our refineries, and they're making sure that there's sufficient machine for our power, that will be actually supplying power, there's water, we will not have excuses coming from our power minister saying that we do not have so much water to pump. Now, I'm happy to see here that about 1.3 billion naira is being handed over into the Zugiru hydroelectric plant. I'm happy to hear that, but I'm hoping to see more work being done in that regard, because we know that's the reason why most of our multinationals left. Why? Because they could no longer continue running at a loss rather than a profit. So let's look forward to seeing the steps our leaders will take eventually. Just like we say, it's beyond the words. We want to see the work being done. Well, Rachel, before we continue further, we'd love to take a break. We've said quite a number of things. We've mentioned a number of stories. Here we're seeing that the Senate and the federal government will actually be probing the over 30 trillion naira ways and means that was collected during the former administration, talking about Buhari and then also the former CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele. And then we're having a number of things, steps that this present administration feel that they need to take to make sure that things come back regarding the hardship. And then we're seeing that even our needs are back again. So we'll be having petrol being distributed. Possibly this will reduce the queues we are having in some part of the country as a result of, you know, lack of petrol being supplied. So we'll just take a break at this moment, and when we come back, we will continue with the paper analysis. Please stay tuned with us.
Make your everyday informative. Make your everyday count. Know your world, daily affairs, national and international, with authentic news events as they unfold on Global News and Zuma Nigeria, Monday to Friday at 1 p.m.
Thank you for staying tuned. It's still the Dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories on the paper. We're saying that flooding already is in Lagos State. Here, NEMA is telling us about 151 houses have been affected. And I think this should be an eye-opener for other state governors and communities to do something concerning clearing of drainages and making sure that there are waterways just before the rain comes in. I mean, in the next 3 months, the rains will be coming in fully in every other part of the country. So it is important that states look into that. We're seeing that Senate will be probing the 30 trillion naira ways and mean that actually was being collected a loan from the CBN Bank during the Buhari administration. So many other stories are on the paper. You can actually comment on any other story that is of interest to you this morning. Remember, you can join us on Facebook and on YouTube and drop your comments there. I still have Rachel Tazi with me. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome, sir.
All right. Let's take a look at the next paper, and I guess we'll be looking at the New Telegraph newspaper. And a New Telegraph newspaper, fuel scarcity looms as importation drops by 57%. Available product to last 3 weeks, pump price hit 700 naira. We're seeing some parts saying 1,000 naira to a liter. We hope that that will drop down soon. And on the price control regarding cement, federal government threatened to open the borders for cement importation. More detail can be found on page 8. But Richard, I remember cement was part of the thing that was on that 43 list that the CBN opened. So I'm kind of lost. What borders again are we opening for? Is it just strictly cement importation? Because it was part of the thing.
It was part of it,
yeah,
yes.
so I'm wondering why we're still having that. Well, we'll just follow up that story closely.
Yeah, I believe it has to do with the monopoly of who is in charge and then who has taken over it, because whether we like it or not, we have the Dangote cement having monopoly. In Nigeria, we have BOA just, following right behind us. The distribution is still not much. Now, I believe that there are, this is called it's not an embargo, it's called a quota. How much of it can be brought into the country. In as much as there's no ban on it, then I believe now the federal government, the threat is probably increasing it. So imagine if it was just 1 million coming in bags of cement, for example, because we already have Dangote and then BOA, now they will increase the quota for how much will come into the country so that it will be able to crash down the price. I think it's just a numbers game precisely.
Okay. Well, we hope that that will actually help to regulate the price. Since we're looking at the price of 7,000, 8,000, we're already seeing even bricklayers are complaining.
It's high,
let's just see how the government intends to control the prices of all of this eventually. Still on the New Telegraph newspaper, Obasanjo seek laws on organ harvesting donors and patients. More detail can be found on page 3, and I think that should be looked into closely. And then more detail can be found on page 3. And on insecurity, reps pass state police bill for second reading. It's time for state police to curb the rising insecurity coming from Sagi. More detail on page 3 and 9. National Secretary, we are not your slaves, Southeast PDP tells the National Working Committee. Respect our decision coming from the governor of Enugu State, Mba. More detail found on page 2. Custom plans to dispose of food items seized from smugglers nationwide. And the big story, Senate to probe Buhari and others over the 30 trillion naira ways and means. Claims reckless spending caused the nation's current woe as commotion characterized debate. Desperate politicians sabotaging the economy coming from the vice president. More detail in the paper. Federal government target $10 billion to fix the forex war and stabilize Naira to create jobs by unlocking asset and optimizing the GDP. Tinubu orders settlement of the outstanding 342.4 million naira the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company's bill. Urges other MDAs to pay up because they mentioned a number of other MDAs are also owing the electricity bills. You can find more on page 5. Federal government concessions Zugiru power plant to Penstock, hint on plans to recapitalize the BOA. More can be found on page 7. Why we won't allow hardship protests in the southeast, coming from IPOP, admits people in the zone are also suffering, and the Ohanize right in the Igbo to shun protests, demand Kanu Eze Igbo's Lagos release. More detail on page 4 and 29. And on forex volatility, 12.5 kg of cooking gas price hit 16,008 in Lagos, and then 18,000 naira in Port Harcourt and Warri. Oil and gas supply asks the federal government to peg dollar rate at 750 naira, threatens strike from March. You can find more detail on page 2 and 8. And downside, we have a study that says no speaking could increase alzheimer's risk. So you can find more of that on page 7. We have a picture story on the front page where we can see the managing director of NNPC and other. So you can do well to grab the paper in more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On the Daily Times, tanker owners resume operation. The big story, experts canvass funding of state police from governor's security vote. Details can be found on page 2. Senate to investigate Buhari's 30 trillion naira ways and means other spendings. Capital inflows to Nigeria fall to $3.91 billion in 2023. NICA confident of rebounds in Nigerian economy. NAFNAP's high-profile kidnapper in coordinated operation. More details can be found on page 2. Federal government to release 60,000 metric tons of grain to stabilize food crisis. And that's all the news on the Daily Times newspaper.
On a nature news, let's see what's happening on our environment. We're having 151 houses affected by the flood in Lagos. That's talking about the Lagos flood crisis. And North Central delayed rainfall unveil Nigerians' weather challenges in 2024. This is a report coming from NEMA. You can find more detail on page 3. Zamfara government intercepts 50 trucks of grain heading to Niger State. And on the climate mitigation, federal government calls for change in West Africa biodiversity narratives. NAQS crackdown on food smugglers and hoarders. More detail found on page 6. Nigerian's minister urges global leaders to act on emissions. More detail found on page 3. ECOWAS to address West Africa biodiversity crisis. And then we have illegal mining fuels insecurity in Nigeria, says lawmaker. Egypt hosts international conference on energy transition in Africa. More can be found on page 6. We have a picture story where we can see the Nigerian Minister of Environment, Alhaji Balarabe Abbas, and other dignitaries at the Inland Transport Committee conference in Switzerland. You can find more detail inside. Downside, we also have a little on sport on page 21. So you can do well to grab the paper in more detail of this story that is of interest to you.
On-sweet crude reports Nigeria gas output up 2.2% to 150.2 BSCF in December. This is a report coming from NNPC. 7.75% of produced gas flared. Gas flaring in Nigeria to end 2030, says NUPRC. You can start with the details on the front page. USCG NIMASA working on removing U.S. restrictions on Nigerian vessels. Total Energies has achieved zero flaring in upstream operation. You can find details on page 2, and that's all the news on Sweet Crude reports.
On Business Day newspaper, the big story says no pay, no power in the electricity sector. So you can start reading on it, talking about that from the second month of 2024. Nigeria has been actually experiencing collapse about 3 times, and then it's actually problematic. And then we're seeing that over 200 million Nigerians are not enjoying the light. So henceforth, there is a rule that you do not pay, you do not get the power. So I think this is a story everyone should be interested to read about. You can start on the front page and continue on page 2. Political will, funding needed to fix the power wall, coming from Adalabu. You can find that on page 2. And we're seeing that government agency among the biggest power debtors annual budget. You can find more of that on page 2 as well. And here an analyst is saying how Nigeria can cope the worst social crisis since 1999. You can start on the front page and continue more in the paper. Low rate as federal government raised less cash at bond auction. Bonds worth 1.49 trillion naira was sold at 60% of the amount offered. Here is where Nigeria can tap Eurobond market in 2024. You can turn to page 30 to read that. Tinubu probes Buhari's 23 trillion naira CBN Ways and Mean loan. You can find that on page 31. We have a picture story showing us the long queues that is actually in Lagos State as a result of lack of fuel as of yesterday evening. So you can find more detail of any other story that is of interest to you.
On Sporting Sun newspaper, Messi gives Barca Museum his 8th Ballon d'Or trophy. You can find details at the back page. Guardiola apologizes to Phillips for overweight comments. Neymar throws final dig at Mbappe. Gundogan plays down Barca's chances in the Europa Champions League. Barca keen on Diger's sweep, and then we have Modric rejects Real Madrid coaching offer. The big story on the paper, Mbappe to earn stunning £128 million sign-on fee. You can find details inside the paper. Leicester declares Iheanacho fit for Leeds clash. Indeed, is still out. New Napoli coach Jules Osimhen orders for Barca tie. You can find details on page 6. And on the Africa Games, NTF invites 24 athletes camp. Anthony Joshua warned Ghana has improved. Statement coming from Cooper. You can find details at the back page. And we have a statement from Ward. We owe Hudson so much. We're ready for Glasner. PSG outlines budget for De Jong, and then has now handed double injury boost for Porto clash. And that's all the news on Sporting Sun newspaper.
Well, that's how far we can go in the program this morning. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome,
for doing this
Sally.
with me. And also thank you to our viewers, thank you to our supporters, thank you to the crew members and everyone that made sure that this program is prompt on air. Until we come your way tomorrow, do have a blessed day ahead.